Discover the amazing twist, CEO's seat stolen, flight grounded as inspiring truths are exposed. The rain poured down like a judgment, a deluge pounding against the conference room windows of the Johnson architecture firm. Inside, Sarah Johnson felt it in her bones, her father's legacy, enveloped by whispers of stolen glory and corporate power plays. As a junior architect in a family-run firm, the 27-year-old had always longed for recognition. Burdened by self-doubt, she often submitted to the shadows while her colleagues flaunted their designs. Yet today, as she stumbled upon her late father's blueprints for an eco-friendly skyscraper, a flicker of hope surged. Too soon, those good feelings twisted into a knot of dread when rumors swirled that Richard Hartman, the ambitious CEO with a magnetic charm, aimed to claim the credit for her father's inspiring vision during the annual meeting. Tension hallmarked the air like a tightly coiled spring. Sarah's heart raced as she examined the blueprints, shadows of possibility etched on yellowed paper. What if she presented her father's work, the life he breathed into sustainability? But would she betray her ideals by exposing Richard, a man who had been a mentor? Torn between the aching desire to prove her worth and the loyalty to her family's principles, she felt the walls inching closer, closing her in. What was the right course here? The ethical dilemma suffocated her like an iron cage, trapping her in indecision. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The storm outside matched the turmoil inside her, like a synchronizing heartbeat. As she swiveled in her chair, her fingers grazed the rough surface of the blueprints, potential screamed at her, but the weight of Richard's impending plans clawed at her resolve. His charisma masked ambition that could bury her father's legacy, along with her dreams. The anxiety resonated through her muscles, tightening, twisting into a heavy coil of determination and despair. Each tick of the clock echoed in her ears, dulling her heartbeat. She must act. The world had to know, yet the thought of confronting Richard it paralyzed her. With every drop hitting the glass, her muscles tensed in apprehension. Thunder rumbled as if foreshadowing the clash looming ahead. This was it. She could either let the storm outside swallow her father's vision or challenge the man who had established himself at the center of the firm. But as she stood there poised, an unrelenting doubt licked at her resolve. Would revealing Richard's intentions shatter the very foundation of her family legacy? This fear twisted through her, deepening her internal chaos. Could she live with herself if she remained silent, all while her father's dreams slipped away? With the rain drumming, the room crackled with unease. Sarah felt her heart beat louder than the storm, each moment stretching into eternity. The walls seemed to close in, whispering doubts and stoking her fear. Somehow she needed to find clarity in the chaos. Could she find the courage to stand tall, confront Richard, and reclaim her father's legacy? Or would she fold, quaking beneath the weight of inherited expectations? The storm outside raged with all the madness she felt inside, and just as she opened her mouth to speak, a strike of lightning illuminated the room, igniting her soul with a desperate yearning for resolution. The moment teetered on the edge of chaos. The fate of two legacies hung in the balance, hers and her father's. The crack of thunder jolted Sarah from her reverie, and her heart hammered wildly in her chest. Time was slipping away like sand through her fingers. Richard's charisma, once a comfort, transformed into an ominous shadow that threatened to eclipse everything she held dear. Her father's dream, meticulously sketched on the yellowed blueprints, represented not just an architectural concept but a legacy of values that had shaped her life. The pressure mounted. She could hear the clamoring voices of doubt echoing in her mind, discouraging her attempts to rise above the noise. Determination flickered in her like a fragile flame. This was her moment, but to seize it, she had to confront the fear that had lurked within her for so long. The room trembled with unspoken words and unresolved conflict. Sarah stood, not allowing the weight of the doubt to weigh her down any longer. Each inhale filled her with chill and clarity. This design was not merely her father's legacy, it was a testament to innovation, sustainability, and hope for the future, the very essence of who she wanted to be. She glanced back at the blueprints as if her father's spirit hovered nearby, urging her on. With a determined breath, she decided she wouldn't be the passive architect of her own life. Instead, she would become the advocate for her father's vision. She thought of the annual meeting and the audience of investors, all eager to hear Richard's vision for the firm, his voice the one resonating in this corporate landscape. But standing up there presented an unbearable prospect. Would they listen to her amidst Richard's established authority? Yet, beneath that uncertainty, a veil lifted, the notion that she had been destined to be a shadow dissolved. She had skills honed in academic rigor and professional experience, but hidden behind layers of intimidation and self-doubt. Why hadn't she noticed this before? Fear and uncertainty had distracted her from seeking her own authenticity. What was the worst that could happen if she truly presented the blueprints? The choice loomed like a fork in the road. She would either silence the whispers that suffocated her father's dreams or allow them to resonate, echoing loudly into the firm's future. Overwhelmed by the prospect, she clenched her fists, feeling the rush of adrenaline surge within. It was time to turn her fears into fuel. She had everything to lose and everything to gain. Sarah gathered the blueprints close to her chest, understanding that by owning this newfound confidence, she was already half victorious. She began drafting her speech, each word carefully constructed to weave together her father's values and her vision for the future, aiming to dismiss Richard's arrogance without breaking her personal ethics. An idea sparked in her mind. She'd showcase how her father's vision could redefine not only their firm's trajectory but the industry itself. With detailed analytics, projections, and parallel comparisons to current practices, she would expose Richard's intentions without directly confronting him. And by doing this, not only would she reclaim her father's legacy, but she would also carve her rightful place in the firm, stepping gracefully into the light she had long shied away from. As the rain continued to pour, a sense of purpose crystallized within her. The meeting approached like an unsolvable puzzle, but armed with her father's blueprints and unwavering resolve, Sarah felt the pieces begin to fall into place. A storm had brewed outside, but it was nothing compared to the tempest of potential raging within her. This was a time for boldness, to transform fear into action, to ignite a personal renaissance that honored her past while propelling her towards the future. But just as she prepared to commit to her presentation, a chilling thought seized her. What if Richard anticipated her move? The stakes had never been higher. She had to be ready not just to face him, but to withstand the fallout of revealing his schemes. The echoes of thunder subsided, but a deeper storm brewed. A confrontation was unavoidable. The time had come to differentiate herself and fight for her father's legacy. Would she be able to navigate the minefield of betrayal and ambition, or would she become another victim of corporate ruthlessness? The annual meeting beckoned, and with it, the realization that her fight for truth had only just begun. The rain pounded relentlessly against the window, mirroring the chaos inside Sarah's mind. If she was going to stand up to Richard, there could be no room for doubt. She paced the confines of her office, rehearsing her presentation in a muttered cadence, envisioning the potential reactions of the investors. Each correction she made to her speech filled her with both dread and excitement. Yet, the underlying intimacy of the moment, standing alone before a room of powerful individuals, ignited something fierce within her. Thoughts swirled as she contemplated Richard's potential retaliation. What dark tactics would he deploy to suppress her revelations? Images of his charming facade darkening, revealing the ruthless ambition lurking underneath, clouded her mind. The stakes were high, and she couldn't afford to show weakness. She was building not just a presentation, but a foundation for her future, the future she had always wanted but hesitated to claim. As she flipped through the blueprints, a sudden recognition washed over her. Her father had built not just structures, but communities. Each line on the yellowing paper whispered stories of dreams turned into realities. She realized these weren't merely architectural designs, they were blueprints of courage, resilience, and integrity. This was how she would define her fight. With each problem, her father had not just found solutions, but new ways of thinking. In this pivotal moment of clarity, Sarah felt the embers of her earlier determination blaze into a fire. She began compiling compelling side-by-side projections that demonstrated how her father's principles could elevate not only their firm but also affect positive change in the industry. She meticulously worked through her projections, ensuring each data point was strategic while capturing the essence of her father's philosophy. Crucially, she noted a chunk of real estate Richard sought to eliminate from their portfolio. The land had held historical significance, and rich development potential could arise from it if aligned with her father's sustainable vision. How could Richard dismiss its worth so easily? She documented her findings, determined to expose his disregard with data-driven insights that could not be ignored. As the clock ticked towards the meeting, she caught a glimpse of herself in the reflection cast by the darkened window. A woman transformed, no longer just an architect working in the shadow of her father, but an empowered force ready to assert herself. Confidence surged as she realized that she had always possessed the tools to succeed, she had simply allowed fear to snuff out the light. With her heart racing, she rehearsed one last time, honing the sharpness of her words, preparing to wield them like weapons in the boardroom. Each phrase was crafted to illuminate Richard's insidious mindset and reclaim her father's vision. Just as she thought the worst was behind her, Sarah recalled a lingering worry: would anyone believe her? Those doubts, however, only fueled her resolve to show undeniable proof. She would back her claims with evidence and a clarity that Richard couldn't manipulate. The moment arrived. She stood before the gathered executives, her palms slightly clammy but her heart steady. Richard's imposing figure loomed in the room, challenging her yet to break. Breathing deeply, she opened with her narrative, letting her father's values guide her words. The audience's gaze fixed upon her, and the adrenaline surged anew. Just as she unveiled Richard's plans juxtaposed with her father's vision, a harsh chime disrupted the moment. Sarah glanced at the screen, her heart racing again as she observed an incongruity in the data. Something she hadn't considered appeared before her, an alarming contradiction hidden in the approved acquisition that would demolish her father's cherished land. The revelation sent her heart plummeting. She now sensed a network of strings being pulled that she had yet to fully comprehend. Richard's face twisted into a smirk, an arch of suspicion rising within Sarah. The battle had only just begun. With renewed determination sparking her spirit, she steeled herself for the truth they were about to unearth. Would this shocking twist be the turning point? Would she be able to reveal Richard's true intent before the investors? The questions pressed against her like thunder rumbling in the distance, and she grasped the moment, ready to confront the truth head-on. The room thickened with tension as Sarah collected herself, anchoring her thoughts against the daunting gaze of Richard and the investors. The projected images flickered ominously on the screen, each visual representation of opportunity and loss caught in a dance of conflicting ideologies. What would unfold from this confrontation could either catapult her career or plunge her into a turmoil she feared would define her. Knowing this, she inhaled deeply, centering herself. "Let us talk about the future," she began, her voice steadying with conviction, "and how a single decision could redefine our legacy." Her focus sharpened, narrowing in on Richard. Was that shadow of disdain on his face a testament to his fear of exposure? The thought buoyed her courage as she advanced through her slides, pointing out the discrepancies in his claims about the planned developments and the historical significance of the land. Richard leaned forward, his steely eyes scanning the data as he calculated his counterstrike. She could sense his unease, a crack in his confident demeanor. It sparked a glimmer of hope within her. If she could provide irrefutable evidence that intertwined passion and analytics, her father's vision with solid business rationale, she could sway the room. "Remove this land from our portfolio?" she asked the heir, though her question was directed at Richard. "At the cost of our community's heritage, at the cost of our values?" She portrayed her concern not merely as a business decision but as a moral imperative. Each point she raised amplified her sincerity, igniting parallel realizations among the audience. The investors shifted in their seats, exchanging glances laced with uncertainty. "Stop this emotional manipulation, Sarah," Richard interrupted, his words slicing through her momentum. They were as cold as the rain striking the window. "We're in the business of profit. What you're suggesting is a sentimental detour." His mocking tone nearly pierced her resolve, yet she harnessed the anger blooming within her. Did he truly believe that profit should come at the expense of integrity? The weight of her father's legacy settled around her shoulders like an armor. "You confuse sentiment with strategy," she countered, eyes locked onto his. With each word, she summoned a newfound strength from within. True leadership lies in fostering connections, not severing them for temporary gains. Sarah pressed on, intertwining the principles of sustainable architecture with financial forecasts, showcasing a synthesis of long-term success and ethical integrity. The room grew quieter, absorbed by her fervor. The charts and projections spoke not just of numbers but of potential communities, thriving and harmonious. It was a vivid illustration of how actions today would ripple into the future. Yet, the air was electric, and Richard's eyes glinted with a simmering rage. She sensed him preparing for another attack, perhaps seeing a weak point in her presentation. But there was a moment, a fleeting one, when she noticed a subtle fidget from one of the board members, a flicker of recognition shared among them as they absorbed her fervent discourse. Was she gaining traction? As she drew closer to the conclusion of her presentation, adrenaline coursed alongside the faint trace of doubt creeping back in. What would she do if Richard openly attacked her credibility? In that split second, the stakes escalated even further. Her heart raced, amplifying the urgency of her next move. She needed something decisive, a final blow that would cement her case beyond question. This was no longer just about her father's vision, it was about her standing and identity as an architect and leader. "I urge you to see beyond profit," she declared, her voice resonating with a newfound authority. "What will we show the world? A legacy built on reverse development, or one that honors history while innovating for the future?" The silence in the room was palpable, rippling with tension and unspoken thoughts. Sarah could almost taste the unease, a shift in power dynamics swirling like the storm outside. Richard's next words could either unravel her mission or set a new course to victory. Would he strategically dismantle her careful arguments or be backed into a corner for his perceived villainy? It was a dangerous game now. The battle had begun in earnest. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to decide what kind of future we aspire to. Are we builders of walls or bridges?" As her heart thundered, she braced for Richard's response, knowing that whatever happened next would change everything. Would he deflect her unwavering resolve, or would she unveil his true intent once and for all? The room hung in an uncertain balance, an ominous pause before the storm. Richard's steely gaze bore down on her, and for a heartbeat, time seemed to stretch. He leaned back, crossing his arms in a calculated display of confidence, a fortress he hoped would intimidate her. "Sarah," he began, voice laced with sarcasm, "what you fail to understand is that nostalgia doesn't pay the bills. You're romanticizing a narrative that simply isn't sustainable." The dismissal stung, reigniting an inner fire within her. It jolted her senses to a sharper focus, and she could feel the eyes of the investors weighing on her. Richard's contempt was a blow, but in it, she recognized an opportunity. The wall he erected around himself served as a reminder of the narrow thinking she was fighting against. Her father wouldn't have accepted such limitations, and neither would she. "Profit," she declared, "is vital, but it isn't the only metric of success. When we invest in our communities, we create an ecosystem that thrives sustainably, where innovation can truly flourish." Each word was laced with passion, an attempt to chip away at Richard's steadfast positioning. "In my vision, we don't just construct buildings, we build a legacy." Her heart raced, yet clarity surged through her. Failure was no longer an option, that thought crystallized and became her anchor. As she continued, she interwove her father's principles, things he taught her about integrity, responsibility, and vision with current market trends, showcasing projects from around the globe that respected local heritage while embracing modernity. Every example resonated with authenticity, a stark contrast to Richard's cold calculations. The tension in the room began shifting, and a murmur ran through the investors. She sensed their curiosity, their engagement. They needed to see not just her points but her conviction, a reminder of what architecture could accomplish beyond mere profitability. And then, out of the silence, one of the women on the board, a previously indifferent figure, spoke up. "Sarah, if we don't adapt, how do we expect to lead? Our market is evolving. What you're suggesting feels far less like a risk now." Her words hung in the air, a subtle shift in momentum that seemed to ripple through those present. Richard's face faltered, a fleeting acknowledgement of unexpected resistance. Sarah seized the moment, her pulse quickening with the realization that she had sparked something crucial. Think of the stories. The lives changed. The revitalized neighborhoods that become not only profitable but beloved. This isn't just an emotional plea, it's a strategic path forward. She could feel Richard's frustration radiating, a storm brewing beneath his controlled demeanor. As he leaned forward again, more aggressive, Sarah steeled herself for whatever retaliation he was conjuring. But she wouldn't buckle. "Make no mistake," he warned, voice low and taut with anger. "At its core, development is about the numbers, Sarah. You can't turn back the clock." "I'm not trying to," she interrupted, raising her voice to drown him out. "But I want to steer the ship in a different direction. Utilize the data to drive what truly matters. People want to invest in authenticity. They seek places that feed their souls, not just their bank accounts." The room started vibrating with tension, it was palpable, alive. She admired the conviction of her own words, recognizing that this was not merely a presentation, this was a confrontation of values. She saw his furious expression turn to something darker, more calculating, as he attempted to regain control. She had managed to push him to a defensive stance, an accomplishment in itself. But as satisfying as that victory felt, doubt crept in. What if it wasn't enough? Richard was formidable, his skepticism rooted in years of success. Could she sustain this momentum? The next moments would be crucial not just for her career but for her sense of self-worth. Her father's legacy weighed heavily on her, and with it came an intrepid unearthing of a deeper truth that confronted all she had believed thus far. The roar of uncertainty rang in her ears. She forced herself to embrace the concern, to transform it into a resolve as she prepared for his next move. Would she be the architect of a new path, or would Richard dismantle her dreams in an instant? In that moment, as the storm outside raged and the room buzzed with the weight of the conversation, Sarah realized she was standing at a precipice. "Let us redefine the future together," she proposed, her voice steady, her heart pounding. "Or face the consequences of inaction, and believe me, history has a way of shifting fates without mercy." All eyes turned to Richard as an ominous silence enveloped them once more. The air felt charged, almost electric, with a palpable potential for confrontation. Would he retaliate with ferocity, or would he consider her untamed vision? The tide had shifted dramatically, but the battle was far from over. Richard's lips curled into a sardonic smile, and in that moment, Sarah could almost feel the gears of his mind grinding. He thrived on conflict, on squeezing people into submission with his calculated disdain. The stakes had risen, and so had the intensity of her resolve. This was her chance, she couldn't afford to waste it. "Reinvent the future, huh?" he mocked, leaning closer to her, arms still crossed as if to shut her out. "You really think people will flock to your dream? The reality is, they need to see the metrics, not hear platitudes." As the investors shifted, Sarah's instinct told her this was her moment to pivot. "Richard, you're right," she countered, setting the tone of the discourse. "Metrics matter, but they can also deceive. Look at our current projects. The ones thriving aren't just numbers, they are stories. Community engagement is what ultimately drives profit. A flicker of uncertainty passed across Richard's face, but she read it like an open book. She had found a crack in his facade, a place where she could delve deeper. It was a small victory, but significant enough to fuel her determination. Let us examine the data, she continued, pushing forward. In cities where we've prioritized heritage and community feedback, we've seen a 30% increase in property values compared to areas driven solely by profit. Customers are investing in places that resonate with them. She saw the interest ignite among the investors. They were craving tangible proof, a glimpse into the connection between fiscal responsibility and emotional resonance. Sarah's confidence surged as she embraced her role, reeling them further into her narrative. I propose we create a development model where both aspects merge, she urged, feeling the warmth of possibility wrap around her. By integrating design with cultural significance, we create spaces that thrive long-term. We can redevelop undervalued neighborhoods while securing financial returns that can surpass our competitors. Richard's gaze narrowed, his eyes glinting with a mix of disdain and intrigue. She had named a seductive opportunity that both challenged his dominion and addressed his insatiable hunger for success. In that moment, she understood the intricacies of their battle. It wasn't merely about winning the argument, but about carving out a place for her vision. Still, uncertainty lingered in the air. Could she actually convert the board's interest into commitment? The thought tightened her stomach, grounding her in a reality she had only begun to penetrate. No backing down now. Think of the impact we could create, she pressed on, channeling everything she had learned from her father, from those quiet moments of wisdom he'd imparted. This isn't just an investment, it's a chance to leave a lasting mark on the world, to be remembered for something beyond profit margins. We have the opportunity to lead by example. As she spoke, awareness dawned on her. She was not merely fighting for her ideas but suddenly wrestling with the very essence of her identity. Was she strong enough to stand firmly in her beliefs against Richard? Did her vision possess the weight to shift an industry resistant to change? Richard's frustrated silence was thick and heavy, and Sarah's heart raced, reflecting the tumult of passionate convictions and the stark fear of defeat. This was the critical turning point, the pivot to either liberate or cripple her burgeoning aspirations. She swallowed her doubts, locked eyes with Richard, and fired back. What's the legacy you want to leave behind, Richard? A bottom line defined only by spreadsheets? Or a reinvigorated world where communities flourish? The room receded, folding in on itself as she spoke the words that every cell in her body screamed. Whatever lay ahead was uncertain, but in that precarious moment, Sarah recognized the enormity of her choice, not just in how she would confront Richard but in how she would craft her own future. Richard leaned back, lips pursed, and Sarah stood tall. The questions echoed loudly around her. Was this confrontation enough to galvanize change? As the board began whispering among themselves, the tension hung thick, pregnant with the possibility of a defining moment. Would this spark the beginning of a shift, or would Richard crush her aspiration before it had a chance to ignite? An inner tension coiled within Sarah, pushing her ever closer to the decision she had yet to fully confront the truth of her own capabilities and the facades she had built to hide her vulnerabilities. And as Richard opened his mouth to respond, poised on the edge of contempt, the air vibrated with anticipation. Were they ready to jump into the unknown with her, or would they retreat into Richard's familiar embrace of safety? The moment Richard began to speak, time seemed to slow. His words dripped with the same disdain that had saturated their conversations in the past. You think this is some noble crusade, Sarah? You're idealizing a fundamentally flawed approach. Without hard numbers, you're just spinning tales. For a heartbeat, doubt crept back into Sarah's mind, threatening to unravel her hard-won confidence. But then she felt it, the purpose that had driven her this far solidified into an anchor. She reminded herself of the late-night brainstorming sessions, the passionate discussions with communities yearning for change. This wasn't about defeating Richard, it was about forging a legacy. "Richard," she asserted, raising her voice slightly, "I'm proposing a shift. And yes, there will be metrics, but the heart of the matter lies in understanding what those numbers represent: people, stories, and real connections. We have an opportunity to redefine what success looks like." The group's murmured reactions bounced around the room like echoing footsteps in a cavern, creating a symphony of curiosity mingled with skepticism. She could see a few investors leaning forward, intrigued and opening. "Let's make it tangible," Sarah pressed, flipping through the data sheets she'd meticulously prepared. Her hands were steady as she displayed her projections and a few poignant case studies on the screen. "Here are real-life examples of communities transformed through our strategies. Areas once perceived as forgotten are now thriving, not just economically but socially as well." She saw the flicker of engagement in their eyes, and the familiar fear of inadequacy was replaced with forward momentum. Richard shifted in his seat, although his lips remained pressed, an indication he was unwilling to concede. But that was irrelevant. Sarah was taking control of her narrative now. "Imagine a project that doesn't just meet the market need but resonates deep within the community. How can we measure the value in lives lived, cultures celebrated, and dreams realized?" She challenged, the intensity in her voice amplifying her message. "Metrics are important, yes, but they can't be the sole measure of our worth." For a moment, silence enveloped the room, thick and heavy. Richard's facade was cracking, and it was intoxicating to witness. This was the transformation she sought, not just for herself, but for the very nature of their business. As she breathed in the encouraging energy radiating from her peers, she felt a strange yet liberating tension tighten her gut. This was her moment of growth, an evolution in how she perceived strength. She no longer needed validation from Richard or anyone else, she was defining her path. Yet inside, the conflict intensified as the question loomed larger: was her vision strong enough to overcome Richard's influence, to become an unstoppable force? Did she possess the grit necessary to navigate the murky waters of corporate politics? Richard finally interjected, his voice laced with condescension, "You're painting a picturesque utopia, but the real world doesn't function that way. Then let's change it." Sarah shot back, blind to the repercussions of her boldness. "Why not challenge the established narrative? We've always done things this way, and it's led to stagnation. Embrace the idea that the business landscape can host dreams alongside profits. We can revolutionize ourselves. Transform how the industry sees success." Something flickered in Richard's eyes. Was it fear, or acknowledgement? The relentless pace of her heartbeat echoed in her ears, reminding her of the stakes. Her next words would be critical. What Sarah needed was clarity on her next move, how she would further solidify her newfound identity. "Ask yourselves," she faced the investors directly, "what kind of legacy do you want to be part of? One that profits by diminishing culture? Or one that fosters communities while achieving financial success?" She realized that this wasn't merely her battle against Richard, it was an expedition into her own resolve, testing her commitment to a vision that might seem idealistic but was rooted in reality. As the whispers in the room grew louder, indicating a commence of debate, Sarah sensed the shift within her, an unlimited potential waiting to unfold. Then, just as she prepared to build on this momentum, a sharp voice interrupted. "What if we decide to back Richard? What then?" A new investor, supporting Richard's iron grip, stood resolutely. The challenge was set before her, the path veering toward an unseen divergence. And at that moment, Sarah understood the greatest revelation of all: the battle was not about swaying them to her side, it was about holding firm to her beliefs, even when the tide threatened to rip her away. The stakes had never been higher, and as anticipation loomed around her, she steeled herself for the upcoming confrontation. Would her journey magnify into a successful transformation, or would she drown in a quagmire of doubt? The time had come to face the echoes of her conviction, and she braced for the next wave of resistance. The tension thickened as all eyes shifted to Sarah, the weight of expectations wrapped around her like a shroud. She felt the urgency in her chest, a bubbling mix of determination and anxiety. For a moment, silence engulfed the room, broken only by the soft shuffle of notepads and the electronic hum of digital devices. Richard's smug expression was a fortress, challenging her to make a decisive move. Yet the question echoing in her mind had transformed from "Can I convince them?" to "What do I stand for?" "Let us flip this on its head," she said, projecting a newfound authority. "If Richard's right, if numbers alone dictate success, then what's the point of our existence in this industry? We're more than just balance sheets." Each word rang out with a clarity that surprised even her. The investors exchanged glances, intrigued. This was her chance to assert not just ideas, but her very essence into the fray. "What do you want your investment to say about you?" she continued. "We stand at a crossroads. We can either sink deeper into apathy or ignite a transformation. Consider the archetypes of the companies you invest in. Do you see them as merely profitable, or do they transform lives?" She felt a spark ignite within herself as she challenged them directly, provoking thought about their own legacies. The young investor's challenge still resonated in the air. Would they back Richard? The room shuddered with uncertainty, opening a crack in the once stalwart barrier of Richard's influence. Sarah leaned into that crack, pushing harder. Richard represented stagnation, a refusal to evolve. She represented possibility, a path forward cluttered with challenges but rich with potential. "I believe," she said, fueling her conviction, "that success is intertwined with responsibility. Our goal isn't just to produce revenue, it's to create options, opportunities, and a future for the people who engage with us. We can reconcile profit with purpose." As she spoke, she felt her body responding, an energy coursing through her veins that transcended mere ambition. It was a calling, a chance to redefine her role within this narrative. She touched the edge of her projection screen, and the images shifted again, revealing communities dotted with laughter, vibrant festivals, and collaborative spaces where dreams materialized. "Look at these faces," she insisted, her voice steady. "Each one represents a story that traditional metrics can't capture, a life enhanced, connections made, hope fostered. This isn't utopia, it's the potential reality if we dare to invest with intention." Richard's face darkened, his fingers tightening around the edge of the table. Fear danced in the shadows of his eyes. Sarah felt empowered. She was no longer just combating his cynicism, she was embodying the change she wanted to see. Yet, as clarity washed over her, a flicker of doubt still lingered in the background, an uncomfortable static. What if the investors found Richard's arguments more palatable? What if they chose the path of least resistance? The stakes were dizzyingly high, and every heartbeat echoed with uncertainty. But she couldn't afford to falter now, not when her vision had finally taken shape. "We have a choice," she implored, scanning the room and drawing them into her orbit, "to align ourselves not just with financial success but with transformative impact. Who among you is ready to be part of something bigger?" At that moment, Sarah made a crucial decision, a turning point spiraling into her internal narrative. Win or lose, her values remained non-negotiable. Her voice hardened with conviction. "Because we aren't just investors in a company, we're architects of the kind of world we want to leave behind." Before she could gather her bearings, another voice pierced through her fervor. "Are you really prepared to lose everything for this vision?" The skepticism was palpable, yet it dripped with a challenge that hung heavy in the air. The tension escalated, Sarah felt the ground shift beneath her. The potential for triumph or defeat danced on the notion that maybe she had to sacrifice something of her own to truly embody her mission. As she met the skeptics' gazes, she understood that this was the moment she'd been building toward: the risk, the stakes, the transformation not just within others but within herself. Would she hold her ground, or would she buckle under scrutiny? The path forward was obscured, ripe with uncertainty, yet one truth spun itself into clarity: she had laid her foundation, and it was steady enough to bear the weight of her convictions. Would it hold firm when the tides of dissent rose ever higher? Sarah's heart raced as she absorbed the weight of the question lingering in the air. It wasn't merely a challenge, it was a line drawn in the sand, a forcing of her hand at the most delicate hour of her career. The fear of losing everything created a turbulence within her, yet it also ignited a fire beneath the surface. Taking a moment, she inhaled deeply, steadying herself for the reflection she was about to share. "Let me ask you this," she said, voice resolute, her gaze steady on the skeptic. "What is everything worth? Can we really equate our values and beliefs, our integrity and our potential for something as transient as profit?" The room held its breath, Sarah's words weaving through their collective psyche, pulling emotions and reflections from the corners of their minds. She had become not just a participant in this discussion but its tangential force, looping unseen connections between passion and purpose, fear and determination. Richard's distaste oozed through his clenched jaw, but he could only stare as she pressed on. The tables were turning, and he sensed his authority slipping. This realization emboldened Sarah, sharpening her focus and determination. What if we risk that everything we know now, our secure jobs, our predictable revenues, could bring forth a world that actually mattered? She allowed the silence to fill the space again. The stakeholders murmured softly, the tension alive with possibility. Some nodded, intrigued by the prophecy of change she was crafting. "By pushing against the status quo, we may very well lose this deal," she admitted, her voice dropping to a more personal octave. "But what if we gain something infinitely more valuable? A chance to redefine success, not for ourselves alone, but for future generations to come?" The stakes elevated. Each line she delivered was not merely a statement but a personal testimony. In voicing her passion, Sarah unearthed not just her aspirations but her fears, a rawer, deeper vulnerability that drew the room closer. She illustrated her journey, revealing moments of doubt that had plagued her during her rise, a mosaic of hard-won victories and difficult realizations. "I've stood at the crossroads," she admitted, remembering sleepless nights spent questioning her own motives. "I've tasted the bitterness of defeat and the sweetness of success. What I've learned is that authenticity will outweigh all the convenience and complacency borrowed from conventional wisdom." An internal dialogue sparked within Sarah as she stood before them. She felt the hum of her own pulse, the discipline reshaping her thoughts into a growing conviction. If this was her moment of truth, if she was to reclaim her narrative, then she must commit wholly to her values, unrepentant and unabashed. But Richard was not conceding. His voice sliced through the air. "Are you not afraid of being naive? That your passion might lead you into a pitfall?" "You call it naivety," she replied, leaning into the challenge, "but I call it hope. The willingness to risk this is where growth begins. Perhaps the true naivety lies in refusing to venture beyond comfort, to embrace our potential for greatness." Desperation tinged Richard's features as he leaned forward, confusion wrestling with indignation. The room was poised, energy coalescing around Sarah, bolstered by her unwavering presence. Yet, doubt clung to her heart, coiling itself tighter with every moment. Was it still within her power to persuade these stakeholders? Could she seize this momentum and steer it toward collective agreement, or would Richard's influence cast her into the shadows once again? Pausing to lock eyes with each investor, she felt vulnerability wash over her, a nagging worry unspooling in the pit of her stomach. Suddenly, Sarah realized it wasn't just about making her case, it was about daring them all to redefine their own. The moment felt electric, and she made a choice, stepping out further. "Invest with me, not because of numbers on a page, but by envisioning a legacy forged in values and profound impacts." Their eyes flickered with hesitance, and as moments sharpened into potential decisions, Sarah sensed a shift, the recognition that perhaps they were searching for something deeper too. And hidden within that burgeoning tension, she discovered the razor-thin line she had walked, where sacrifice and ambition could intertwine. Would she step beyond it, embracing the risks that loomed? The air thickened with unspoken words. As the investor closest to her, a woman with piercing eyes, opened her mouth to respond, the tension twisted anew. Was this the moment Sarah had always longed for, or had she unwittingly walked into a trap that could redefine her future? The atmosphere simmered, pregnant with uncertainty and anticipation. Sarah stood before the boardroom table, her heart racing faster than ever, a monumental shift challenging her very existence after years of feeling overshadowed. She had argued passionately, painting a vivid picture of her father's legacy through the lens of progress. Yet, just as she felt the tide turning, she faced her deepest fears. Would her words resonate, or were they merely echoes lost in Richard's shadow? As she locked eyes with the woman from the board, she dared to hope for validation. Perhaps if just one voice aligned with hers, the others would follow. "Sarah," the woman said, her tone measured but inquisitive. "You present an impassioned argument, but how do we deal with the reality of immediate profitability? Foundations are crumbling under market pressure. If we invest in what you suggest, will it truly yield results in such a competitive landscape?" The question pierced through the air like a bolt of lightning, yet instead of retreating, the adrenaline surged within Sarah and crystallized her resolve. "That's precisely the heart of my vision," she answered, her tone steady and assertive. "We can redefine what profit looks like. It doesn't have to be at odds with sustainability or community values. Companies that invest in ethical practices and community engagement are statistically shown to outperform their peers in the long run. I invite you to a future where profit is a reflection of our values, not just numbers on a page." Richard scoffed, dismissing her with a wave of his hand. "You're dreaming, Sarah. It's easy to preach about ideals. But business is about making tough choices, not fairy tales." His condescension stung, but it ignited a fierceness within her. "Fairy tales?" she echoed, disbelief rippling through her voice. "My father's blueprints are not fairy tales. They are a representation of a future we can walk into, not stumbling blindly in the dark. This isn't just about buildings, it's about building communities that thrive together." The tension thickened as the audience leaned in, intrigued, some exchanging surprised looks. Richard's facade was cracking, she could see the gears turning in his mind as he processed her defiance. Will conglomerates like ours be brave enough to stand for something greater than cash flow? Sarah continued, fueled by the energy radiating from her own words. We can be pioneers rather than competitors. We can reclaim our industry and stand out as leaders if we embrace innovation and integrity. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the room. The moment stretched as she watched her fellow executives consider the implications. Richard was visibly irked, yet Sarah sensed uncertainty creeping into his expression. Thus far, she said, deliberately slowing her tone to emphasize each word, our projects have adhered to the status quo. Why? Because it was easier. Is this really the legacy we want to leave, to have our names fade amidst skyscrapers that reflect only greed? It was a masterful move, deftly challenging the very foundation of Richard's negotiating stance. She could feel the shift in momentum. The room buzzed with an energy that surely hadn't been there just moments before. Finally, the young investor, the previously skeptical individual who had questioned her loyalty to her vision, raised a hesitant hand. What Sarah's suggesting, it resonates, she acknowledged. Companies that innovate sustainably often tap into markets we've overlooked. Perhaps it's time we redefine our approach instead of following outdated paradigms. Sarah felt her heart swell with gratitude, yet she steeled herself for the inevitable counterstrike. But before Richard could rally his defenses, more voices joined the conversation, a cascade of acknowledgement speaking directly to the truth Sarah had unearthed. I agree, another board member chimed in. The younger demographics value transparency and integrity. They want to connect with brands that stand for something. Richard's expression shifted from disbelief to irritation, but he laid low for a moment, measuring the room. As murmurs of agreement formed a chorus, Sarah seized the opportunity to solidify her stance. Imagine the freedom to set new benchmarks for success. We would acknowledge both financial frameworks and cultural significance in what we create. Our firm could be a leader, a beacon of hope in an industry oftentimes lost in greed. The tide had turned completely. Sarah could feel a current of transformation sweeping through the room. Her conviction had carved space for possibility. She wasn't merely a junior architect anymore, she was a driving force, reclaiming her narrative and her father's legacy brilliantly. Richard finally rose, rage simmering beneath his carefully crafted mask. This is absurd. You're wielding fanciful ideas like weapons of misguided ambition. Because ambition was never misguided when it was rooted in purpose, Sarah fired back, her confidence surging. I refuse to dilute my father's dream into an afterthought, a mere statistic among prophets. If we can't create with intention, then why are we even here? Every gaze in the room was riveted on her, and as if synchronized, their understanding blossomed. This wasn't just a conflict over designs, it was a battle for integrity, a fight for legacy over short-term gains. In that moment, Sarah felt liberated. She had reached new depths of understanding, emerging not only as an architect, but as a leader in an evolving landscape. Richard's ire was now palpable, a last-ditch effort to regain control. But the room's energy was shifting toward Sarah. As she concluded, she spoke directly to the potential investors. We are at a crossroads. We can choose to continue wedged in the past, or we can forge a future that honors the legacies we've built while shaping a better tomorrow. The board deliberated quietly, and she soaked in the intensity of change unfolding before her. As she stepped back slightly, her breath came in waves of exhilaration and clarity. Would they heed her call? Would they recognize their power in reshaping the path ahead? Finally, the chairperson broke the silence, a smile breaking through. I believe it's time we take a risk on that future with you. A wave of applause erupted from the room, shattering the remnants of Richard's authority. It was done. In that moment, Sarah had not only reclaimed her father's legacy but had solidified her place within the firm as a visionary leader, earning the respect she had long sought after. Through that confrontation, she had transformed from the shadow of her father's legacy into an architect with a voice, an architect unafraid to forge a path that intertwined integrity with innovation. With vitality coursing through her veins, Sarah Johnson smiled. She had conquered the barriers that had once confined her. She had awakened her own potential, ushering in a new chapter not only for herself but for the very foundation of the firm she held dear. In her heart, she knew this was just the beginning. Now was the moment to cement this monumental victory further, to inspire others, to engage with the spirit of transformation beyond the conference room's walls. And as whispers of a transformative legacy hummed through the air, she would not forget her father's doodles on the aged blueprints. They would guide her into a future unfurling just before her eyes. As her pulse steadied with the rhythm of triumph, she knew distinctly this was her moment. And she would embrace every bit of it. Do not wait. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support is crucial, every click counts. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending below, we want to hear your perspectives. And share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to spread this message, the time for transformation is now. Don't wait even one more second to share.